I've been getting a lot of comments on a video I posted about the Iran Israel conflict going on right now. Um, People get very tribal with this. They take sides. They'll say that either Israel is a terrorist state or that the Iranian regime is authoritarian, and that they um, promote terrorism all around the world through like Shiite militias like Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas in the West Bank and so forth. So, excuse me, in Gaza and so forth. So, this issue has a lot of historical nuances, but essentially, this is a byproduct of the Cold War and American exceptionalism. So, back in the 1930s, Iran elected the first, well, a democratically elected official by the name of Mohammad Mossadegh, and he was a secular reformer, if you will, and he wanted to nationalize Iran's oil because back in the 1930s they were getting exploited by British Petroleum, or known as BP, right? So um, this wasn't didn't coincide with the West's agenda, so they went ahead and overthrew Mossadegh and they put the Shah Reza Pahlavi, which is known as the Shah of Iran, up until 1979, which led to the extreme swing of the pendulum into obviously fanaticism or radicalization. It was an Islamic revolution, and mostly in part because socioeconomic conditions that were imposed on the Iranian people for decades for the most part. So that's sort of the backstory on that. Obviously, it's a lot more nuanced and so forth. But the Persian people they're awesome. They've always been industrious. They have a rich history, and they don't deserve what's happening or any unprovoked attack by Israel by any means. So, but they do have an authoritarian regime that, again, is a byproduct of Western intervention in the past. Don't take my word for it. Literally, go pick up a history book and read about it. As far as Israel is concerned, there's many states that have been started on bad ideas or illegal premises. So Israel essentially was a state that was created in 1948, which was due in part because of World War II, and then before World War II because of anti-Semitic rhetoric all around Russia. Europe and Russia, right? Like pogroms and blood libels and things of those of that sort. So essentially, this is also a byproduct of colonialism. You could, thank the British for that. Palestine was a British mandate, so they had a lot of refugees in Europe. So what they decided to do was, well, let's give them a state, and what a great idea! Let's give them, Arab lands that they haven't been in for 2,000 years, and promote just insane messianic prophecies and turn European Jews into farmers, and that worked out well, right? Essentially, what they did was they took the most precious thing people have, which is their land, their home. So you've heard terms like Nakba, where about 700,000 or more Palestinians were forcibly removed from their homes, and that started a whole lot of bloodshed, a bunch of wars, and here we are. So the Israelis living in Israel today aren't culpable for that, right? They're not. That's like 4, 5 generations in. They're just living their daily lives, and they just happen to be born there. Like some of you are born by happenstance. I don't know. Here in the U.S., right? Whether Pennsylvania, California, name your state. You didn't have any choice in that. So there's many countries around the world that have started on bad premises or bad idea. However, I guess the idea is to, you know, things happen by momentum, right? They just perpetual motion of things that have done by the past. You're inheriting our father's demons, if you will, right? And then you have to deal with them. So I don't have the solution to this. Obviously, the solution is, you know, to give the Palestinians right to self determination, stop illegal settlements in the West Bank. Clearly, Israel has to clearly define what its borders are. It's failed to do that since forever. As far as the Iranian regime is concerned, they're no good. They're doing no good for the Iranian people. These are pretty bad dudes with their own agenda. I'm not too informed into their internal nuances of their politics on today. I think since Ahmadinejad was president, I don't know what's going on with Iran. I know they want a nuclear program. I highly doubt they want a bomb. In my opinion, I'm no expert in this shit, but I don't think they want a bomb. I think they would have had a bomb already by now. I mean, they've been had a nuclear program for over 20 years now. It doesn't take that long to enrich, uranium 235. Again, you get a couple of centrifuges, a couple of thousand of them, and you could pretty much make a bomb. Clearly, they have the missile capacity and delivery systems for these type of weapons. So I think a lot of it just posturing. They Iranians don't want a war in their front, obviously because they had a nasty war in the '80s. They lost a lot of people, and so they don't want to fight a border war in their front. So historically, they do these proxy wars and fund um, these militant organizations all over like the Middle East, just to create chaos there. In other words, their policy is kind of like America's policy: fight them over there, so we don't have to fight them over here. And that seems to be their policy. Now they're capitulating because they've lost again. Hezbollah and Hamas have been they've been utterly destroyed for the most part, right? In terms of their military hierarchy, their leadership, their infrastructure, their weapon caches and so forth. They've been, they fucked all that up. So now they want to negotiate, and Netanyahu's calling for the Iranian people to, revolt. But again, I'm going to say it again, you know, foreign invaders are never welcome. There's no better way of uniting a people than having a foreign invader liberate you. So again, go back to history. If you look at the German invasion of the Russians through Ukraine, before the Germans invaded Ukraine, the Ukrainians were starving. So Joseph Stalin, the Soviet Union, was literally imposing a famine in Ukraine. So the Ukrainians welcomed the Nazis as liberators, and how bad were the Nazis that they just decided to join up, if you will, or not join up because they were part of the Soviet Union, but really glued a sort of nationalistic movement in Ukraine to fight the Nazis, right? Because there's nothing worse than someone starving you or someone actually making you dig your own grave before they shoot you. So again, this whole rhetoric about we're going to liberate you, but if you're bombing the population, they're going to fucking hate you. Again, you could go back to Iraq 2003, Libya 2011, Vietnam, same case, right? Even though in Vietnam, we're liberating from Ho Chi Minh, even though he had, I think, 80 or 90% of the popular vote, between North and South Vietnam, right? Because the South Vietnamese president was also a puppet, um, you know, a puppet leader, put there by the U.S. And again, these are all the byproducts, the fallout, the leftover, the radiation of the Cold War. Everything that's going on in the world today is that. It's basically decisions that were made before even I was born, and we're still paying the tab on some of this. So the cure to this is getting informed, understanding the root causes of all these situations, and start getting better informed, get better information, get more objective information, look at it from a cold lens, and start to take a more humanitarian approach to all these things, right? Not repeating the same mistakes. As they say, history doesn't repeat, but it sure the hell rhymes.